Hello and welcome back, guys. So in case you're wondering the real difference here between these questions, the multiple choice one and the objective one will be marked by the website itself, because the objective one here has one word answer usually, or maybe usually a one word answer. And so if the teacher will put in the answer to this one, and then the website will compare the two answers the student has given and the one the teacher added. But on the multiple choice one as well, there will be A, B, C, D, and then the teacher will put whether it's A, B, C, or D that is the correct answer. And so the website can use that information to mark the questions automatically. But this one requires teacher intervention. So the teacher has to actually check to see if the answers are correct or wrong. And also the teacher can still review any of these to make sure that the website didn't make a mistake of some kind while marking. This will at least reduce the amount of work that the teacher has to do. So only the subjective questions at that time will require their attention. Okay, so let's add an interface. We just need an interface here for adding a test question. Now let's start with the easiest of them all, which is the actually these two are easy. This one is the difficult one. So on this one, let's say let's try this one, the subjective one. Now let's go back to the table for questions and see what we have. Now I made a mistake here. Test type, it shouldn't be a test type here, it should be the question type, because this will be a list of questions and I want us to be able to know the question type. And also I think I need the user ID so we can know who added that question, just in case there are multiple teachers doing this. So let's click one more here to add one more column. And this one will be user ID. Whoever added this must be recorded. So let's put variable character of 60 as we normally do, and let me save this. All right, good. Now we can add an index to that and then change the test type to question type. So change that, and this one is question type. Yeah, something like this. Question type. Cool. So now we are back to normal. Let's see here. Choices. Now the way we're going to save choices is using JSON, because we don't need to search using choices, so we can put in as JSON because we don't need to search. And then secondly, we don't know how many multiple choice questions the teacher may want to add, maybe A up to Z. That's entirely up to them. Okay, so let's make an interface here that we need. Now this one is the test tab view, but I want to copy this. Let's add a new file here. So new file, paste that. Instead of test question, we're going to say add subjective question, like so. Okay, so this one is in the test tab. So let's look for test tab view inc. Instead of view, it's add, but then we will put another dash for subjective. That way we know which one this one really is. So let me come back to the original test view here where we have all this. We just had one add here, but this is not enough because we need different looks for adding different types. So let's duplicate this 2 times. So here we can add subjective, and then this one will be called add multiple for multiple choice, and then finally add objective, which is a one-word answer, those that have a one-word answer. So now the add also here should mimic what we have here. The boom, let's put that there. Add multiple, let's put that there as well. Add objective, let's put that there as well. All right, cool. Okay, very, very nice. So I'll refresh this. Now, another thing is when adding here, we want to be able to use a different function so that we don't overpopulate the, let's see here, what I'm looking for. I'm looking for single test controller. I don't want everything to happen inside this particular function, so we must add a new function here. So let's copy this, come down here, paste. Okay, so instead of index, let's try add subjective, like this, just one word to save time. So everything else remains the same. It's just that we're going to change our tab view. Actually, we don't even need all this is set here. We can just have a tab name directly, like so, because we won't be doing many tabs in this section. So I'll just do this, and this one is add subjective, like so. Okay, cool. We have the pager, we have everything else, and we give the same view. So this is all good. All I need now is to add the actual links to the menu. So back here, instead of single class, it will be, wait a minute. This one will be on single test. So let's change this. Let's see, class ID, yes, we need to change the test ID there. So let's change this to test. This also to test, and this final one to test as well. But then we change this test add into add subjective, because that's the function name that we've created. And then the tab name, we don't really need that because it's added, it comes with it. Because once we are inside this function, we're already giving it a hard-coded tab name, so we don't need it in the link. So refresh and let's click here. So let me try add subjective and boom. Okay, so it's saying that test was not found. Why though? So let me go back here, and it seems the test ID is different to what we are putting in there. So back here, let's see what we need here. So where is this coming from though? Test ID. Let me go back to single test view here, and let's see, it's class ID, view class. Okay, no, that is for viewing a class. So what is the issue here? Let me go back to the database and look at the tests. I want to see the test ID. So this is the test ID. So what are we using here? This is XRP. Let's see, my first test. Yeah, this is so weird because I think we are doing the wrong thing. We are using the class ID here to read. Now, the only reason this worked is because the class ID here, there's only one entry. This is why this worked well. If we had tried to load in a different thing, it wouldn't have worked because the class ID would be identical. So that is where the problem is. So the problem is not with our current links here. These ones are fine. It's on the other one. So let's go back to single test up here, and let's change this to test ID. This is where the problem is. So test ID over here, and come down here as well. We are looking for a particular test. Okay, so now we will have another problem. If I refresh now, we'll see that test was not found. So let's go back to classes, click here, let's go to tests, and now here if I click, it won't find that test. But let me go back here as well, try that. Okay, same thing here. So it means on these links we need to add the test ID and not the class ID that we're adding. So let's come back here. This is inside the single class view. So let's go to class tab tests. Let's see here where we have test name and the like, and where we click right here. This is the button that I'm looking for, the one that takes you to the test itself. So we'll change this to test ID. This is the link where there's single test there. So I will close that one. And then let's go to tests view as well, and tests inc as well. Yeah, and change this as well here to test ID. And close those. So what I was changing there is this here. So that if I click, it takes me to the right test. Even when I go here and click there, I go to the right test. So same thing here, if I now click on subjective question, it will bring me here, add subjective question. So now all we need is some input boxes here to tell us what information we want to add. So let's go back to the table and look at the questions table and see what kind of information we would need here. So the first thing we would need is the question itself as a text format, and then we would need to know the question type, which we can easily add because in the function itself we'll pass through this function when saving, so we will definitely know this is a subjective thing, so no need to add a hidden field to tell us this. And then we will need to know we don't have the correct answer, we don't need to know that. So these things that can be empty here, let me go back to the structure. So for example, correct answer can have a default value. So correct answer should have a default value and choices as well. So let me select these two that can, because the reason I'm selecting these is because certain times they will need to be empty. So to avoid problems, even image as well, the question can never be empty. So, but these three can be empty. So I want to allow no values. So I'll go and click change, and here I'm just going to say no, no, no. That way at least we don't have problems when saving if we don't give those values. Okay, so now that we have that, good. Back to the browse section. So what we really need is a question, an ID of course, and what else? Maybe we may add an image, but that's about it. And the date and the user ID, those things will be added. We don't need no choices, we don't need the correct answer, we also need the question type. So here what we need now is the model itself that will help with this, and this model should be called the questions, test questions, or questions model. So we're just going to copy the test model, copy, because they are kind of similar. Right click, new file, paste, save this, and this one is the, instead of test model, this is the questions model. Okay, cool. So questions model there, save. So let's edit it a little bit to match what we want. So first of all, tests should obviously change to questions. So we have the questions model there, and the table itself is, what is the table name? Test questions. So test underscore questions, like that. Okay, So that'd be the table name. Let's look at the allowed columns. So instead of test, this one is question, obviously, without an S. Let's come back here. Question, and ID will be auto-generated. So, oh, will it? No, that won't be auto-generated either. We need to add it. So instead of class ID, we don't need a class ID, do we? No, we just need to know the test itself. So that one is test ID. And then we don't have a description. We have, let's see here. So we have question type, we have image. So let's add all those there. Question underscore type, and instead of disabled we have answer. Is it answer or correct answer? It's correct answer. So correct underscore answer. And what else do we have? Choices, date, user ID. Choices, date. I think the user ID, since that will be auto-generated, the test ID is not auto-generated because it has to match the actual test. And let's see, image, did I add image? No, I forgot image. Let's put it there. Now, the reason we have image though is that some questions you may need to illustrate using an image, so you can say what is the correct thing in this image or something like that. So that's part of the question. And then there's question type as well. Wait, I added that already. And choices, date. Okay, so that is good. Now, on this one, we don't need the school ID per se, because the school ID is on the test itself. Or is it? Yes. So there's a school ID there, which is all good. This means that somebody cannot get the tests, the answers, the questions for a particular school unless they're accessing a specific test, which will always be accessible through a particular school. So there's no need to add extra data for school ID here at all. So let's remove the make school ID. We don't need that. We don't need a test ID either. User ID maybe. Test ID, no, will come from the input itself. So let's leave that out. What ID do we need? We just needed the test ID and the user ID. So test ID will be out of here. Get user, do we need to know the user? Yes, there's a user ID there, so we will leave the get user. We need to update the validate though. So make school ID, not really a priority here, so out. Make user ID, we will need that. Make test ID, no, the test ID comes with, wait a minute. But we may need a question ID. Let's see here. Because I don't want to rely on the IDs over here, but there will be quite a number of questions. Okay, we'll leave it there with just the ID there. I think that should be enough. This is not so security aware, so I think we can leave it there. So no need for a test ID either. Get user is fine. Okay, I think we are done with this model. Instead of test here, it should be question. So let's change this as well to question. Now, we shouldn't be too strict with the question here. So for as long as it's not empty, we should be good. The question may need some symbols and the like, so let's not be too harsh. Let's remove this. If it's empty, then we can say please add a valid question, like so. And what else? Okay, pretty cool. Alrighty then. So this looks about right. We can adjust it over time as need be, but this is good enough. And let me close that for now. Let me close that as well. Back to add subjective here, tests model. We will need the questions model as well as we submit some data. Right, I'll see you in the next video where we actually do some